Well, in the beginning, I lived in Putney. So I just used to come to the markets to buy West Indian food and bread and yam and whatever. And then I had to leave Putney. So I started looking for a flat, bedsit, whatever. And I was fortunate to get a flat in Tulse Hill. So that was in 1975, I think. So I've lived in and around Brixton since then. I lived in Tulse Hill and then I moved to King's Avenue. And from King's Avenue, I went back to Tulse Hill. And from there, I went to Streatham, Tulse Hill again. And then I'm now on Brixton Road, on the main road. So quite a while, long time since I've lived in and around the area. But in the beginning, it was really, because in them days, everything you wanted, West Indian, you come to Brixton, because the other places weren't as good. But as I say, it's been quite a long time. I can't imagine living anywhere else but in Lambeth, and not necessarily anywhere in Lambeth. But I quite like where I live now because it's very central. You can get to anywhere from Brixton, anywhere. So it's been a long association. It catered a lot for us West Indians. It was vibrant because in them days the market used to lots of music and people seemed quite friendly. It was multiracial. It wasn't as it is now. I think in them days, the most accents you would hear was English and West Indian, the odd other island people, a smattering of Africans. But it was nice coming to Brixton because it was always so lively and there was always something going on, people dancing or individuals just doing their own thing, you know, so they were a part of the fabric, I suppose, of what Brixton was then. But when you didn't live in Brixton, you used to get these negative stories. They've always happened. Like even when the front line was up and before you start to come in and feel comfortable, you might feel a little bit scared or worried. But my first impression, though, was all the products were here. It was, I suppose I was like maybe in my 20s, but it was like home. Because you start to see people, you don't even know their names, but you see them like regularly when you come to Brixton, so they'd say hello and acknowledge you. So it was a feeling of community, even if you didn't belong to it. I don't know if it's because of being black, but then again, the traders on the markets, they were white, and you kind of built up a friendship with them, you know. I've got friendship with the few that are remaining now. Hi, Doreen, you know. So yeah, it was friendly. I think that was my very first impression, and it took away all what I'd been hearing, oh, you mustn't go to Brixton and that sort of thing, you know. So yeah, that was it. It was crowded. Pope's Road used to be chocker, especially like from a Thursday. It's changed a lot because most of the people who used to come to Brixton then weren't able to buy certain things where they lived, but everywhere sells everything now. So when I noticed that the market was changing, my thinking was that was one of the reasons why it had changed, because things were available in people's communities and neighbourhoods. But I do recall, though, that specific times like Easter, it was amazing, you know, because the few shops that did do the bread and the buns, the queues would stretch for wherever, and the fish stalls. So Easter time in Brixton used to be massively, a lot of bodies. But throughout the week, generally, it was still a busy, thriving market. On a Wednesday, I don't know when this stopped, but when I first came to the area, on a Wednesday, it used to be cheap days. So that was another day when you'd walk around the market and get all these brilliant bargains, and there was loads of people there selling everything. But I think when the change started, it was quite slow. Maybe in the late 80s, early 90s. And by now, sometimes when I go down there, I have to think, am I still in the same place? So yeah, it was busy. You had to, like Oxford Street sort of thing. But those are my earliest impressions of Brixton. And there were some real characters who had businesses. Like I think there was Martin, who used to be in a corner at the back market, Reliance Arcade, which is part of Brixton Village now. And he was a real character because he sold all the products, hair, and because in them days, obviously, there weren't all these shops selling all these hairs and that. So he was a real character, Martin. And you just got to know people in a different way. They were more friendly, I think. I'm not going to say it's specific to Brixton. I think because of the way we live now, people are in a rush. A lot of the businesses in Brixton now, I don't know, I'm just kind of made little assumptions. They don't necessarily live in Brixton, so they've come into trade to make money and to go. And from that point of view, I mean, there are the shops like Boots are still there and a few other shops, but 90% of the shops that were in Brixton when I came to live over this side, they've all gone. I mean, Marks and Spencer's and Boots I can think of. Well, obviously Morley's. I think I came to Brixton when Bon Marché was changing or had changed. So that seemed to take away a certain type of people who might used to come to Bon Marché. But generally speaking, I think it's just really a commercial place now. It's not the character that was then has disappeared from my point of view. And talking to the few people that I still know who are on the stalls, they all say the same thing, they're not making any money because of the advent of pound shops and things like that. So, yes, it has changed. The vibrancy, to me, I mean, at the moment there's this big buzz about the food thing because you can't open a newspaper or a magazine without hearing about Brixton Village and this and that and whatever and this new Pop Brixton thing. But it's changed. It's quite different. So it's hard to find the right word to say. The vibrancy. I don't think the vibrancy is there anymore. And I think quite a few people who do come to Brixton now for culture, it's about not loyalty to do something, but they want to do it in Brixton because it will be noted in the wider world that, oh yeah, they've done something in Brixton. So I think my views, maybe I'm being judgmental, I don't think so, but there's a certain type of individual who wants to come to Brixton to do something, but it's not for the community, it's for their own personal you know, enrichment, well, not necessarily enrichment, but it's all their own agendas. Because if I do something in Brixton, yeah, I'll be noticed. So maybe I'm being cynical, but that's the kind of impression that I've come to lately. I think it's been a part of the fabric of Brixton, but it wasn't the most noticeable thing. I think after the first riot, I think a lot of original Brixtonian people moved out because they were frightened and ashamed when they saw all the things that were on the telly and themselves. But there's a new kind of thinking, I think, within the creative media that, yes, if I get something done in Brixton, it will be noticed. It might be in a magazine, it might be a tiny news clip, I don't know, on the internet. So there is, I think, quite a few people who come to Brixton now to do things, they do it for their own motives, for a bit of fame. But you see, because of the connections with the music and like the record shops and all those kind of things, I mean, they've all gone. But when I first lived in Brixton, there were loads of shops, record shops, that used to get music dubplate and all that from Jamaica and reggae, and most of those singers who used to come to London or to come to England, maybe to do tours or whatever in Birmingham or Manchester, they would always come to Brixton because Brixton is the place. So there's some element of longevity, but it's not prevalent now, I don't think, because of YouTube and people uploading or whatever their stuff. I don't see the music scene in Brixton now as being vibrant, because reggae, again, has been diluted and mixed and all that kind of thing. I mean, you mentioned Ram Jam. I remember going there as a teenager. I mean, that used to be our weekend thing on a Sunday night. It was above where I think there's some shops there now, the opticians and Morley's chicken shop, and you know, so you really are you're taking me back now, because I'm starting to remember things that I hadn't remembered for years, like Ram Jam. The Fridge came years later. There used to be little clubs. There used to be a lot of places that we as teenagers could go and have a good time in and around the area, but all that has really, really changed. There used to be a lot of parties, blues parties, you know, until the noise thing came up, and the radios used to blare at the weekend listening to, well, I think it's Vibes FM now, but in those days it was David Rodigan and, my gosh, yes, it has changed a lot, but I don't see the changes being positive in some respects. And I think quite a lot of the young people nowadays, they wouldn't even know what I'm talking about, because the Brixton that they've grown up with. I mean, I've been in the area prior to the riots, and I've been in the area after the riots. And the Brixton that they've grown up with is after the riots and all these changes. Because, I mean, a lot of retailers as well, they left, you know, which for quite a couple of years, I think the economy and all that was pretty, because it was like no go. I mean, I think when, I can't remember who it was, I think when Pizza Hut came, people thought, yeah, something's changing, but they left. And when people like McDonald's came, and now Starbucks and Costas. But there used to be more of a big mix on the main road, the Brixton Road. I remember, right where McDonald's is now, there used to be a furniture shop called Times. And where Iceland is, there was a furniture shop there. I can't quite remember the name, and then we had the underground. You used to be able to walk through there. It was, there were little shops there, independent shops, a cafe. I used to get my salt beef sandwich there because at that time I worked for the council. And the shoemaker was there, and this incense shop was there, which is now on Electric Avenue. So yeah, I've seen a lot of changes, and you're reminding me of them now that I'm thinking about them. See, there would have to be a big shift, I think, there are lots of community projects, lots of things happening in pockets. I don't see a big cohesion because people are fighting for funds. Everybody's fighting for funds for their project. So it's not a feeling of community getting together, I don't think. It's like if you live in Angel Town, you're fighting for Angel Town. If you live in Loughborough, you're fighting for Loughborough. The southern end of the borough, Streatham, I don't know what goes on up there anymore. I used to, because I lived up there. It's like Brixton shouldn't be seen as Lambeth. It's like Brixton is a town within a borough. So when it comes on to, there's some people who've done some really good work, and I think, what's his name? Darcus Howe. He used to be quite vocal, he was quite radical, he used to speak out for us. There was this dub poet, Linton Kwesi Johnson, again. He used to me, although it's creative, he was making a contribution. I think that's probably what I'm trying to struggle to find now. I do try to keep in the know about what's going on, but I don't think people make valuable contributions the way they did in the past. I think it could very well have been it was instinctive. They wanted to do it, so they just did it. It wasn't seen as them doing anything special. But now I think whatever anybody does, they want it to be noticed, to be seen as something special. One of the sad things for me is I might have been living in a bubble, but I didn't realise about this postcode thing and the fact that so many young people, not just in Brixton, but all over the country, but particularly in the inner cities, their lives are so cheap. So I think that was last year. It really hit me, So the way but I just put it down to 21st century living. So, but the contribution that I think people used to make before instinctively, because they wanted to be involved, they wanted to do something, it's not quite the same anymore. There's other motives, other agendas, why people probably do some of the things that they come to Brixton to do. Because when the front line got quite ugly in the 80s, I think, the change was knock down and rebuild. And sometimes I see that as a solution from the powers that be for changes to really take effect. They knock down and rebuild. because you're getting rid of the old and bringing in the new. So there's a new kind of ethos, I believe. When this arch thing came up recently, I started to think, because I noticed maybe about because I'm forever looking around, maybe about 2 years ago or more, Marks and Spencer's used to advertise under the bridge on the high street. And I noticed one day when I went out there that all that had finished, all the things just end now where Marks end. So when all this came up about that arch, and it didn't even click until a few weeks ago, that must have been from when all these new plans were afoot. But the ordinary people who it was really, really going to affect didn't know anything about it until when they did. And I myself didn't even realise that so many businesses were going to be affected, because I thought it was just the ones on Atlantic Road. But then no, because the ones on Brixton Station Road as well, you know. So I think you've got to really be interested in your community, really, to know what's going on. And that means not just talking to people, not just reading, but also looking around with your eyes and see what's happening. So when I realised this the other day, I thought, wow, a lot of people are going to be out of business. And the other thing is, like everywhere else in London, I went to East London the other day and I couldn't recognise Hackney. You know, so I think a lot of things are not just Brixton. It's all over the place. You know, the cities are being, but the thing that also I heard people talking about, oh, they don't want black people in Brixton. They're trying to get rid of us. And I had no views on it. But gradually now, since all the changes with welfare and benefits and the government's priority, I see that the poor people, they're the ones that all these changes are impacting on, you know. I don't know if I should say this. Another thing I've noticed is there's a lot of people out there with mental health problems, you know. There's people out there who have the drink in their brown bag, and I don't know, it's kind of sad really, you know. It's like they've been left behind. So whoever can make a difference. But sometimes I believe it's really quite tough for a lot of normal, everyday people. Because I don't know if you should mention this, but I do voluntary work at my food bank at my church. I should have been there now, but I thought this was more important today. And that has helped me a lot to come out of my bubble. Because on a Friday, we do 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, but I go on a Friday. The people who come through that door. And in the beginning, maybe I do meet and greet, because I can't lift every stuff, so maybe in the beginning I just used to fill out the forms and take whatever their dietary needs might be and their requirements. But now, because our food bank's quite famous, St. Luke's, we ask people questions. Why are you here? You know, and 80% now it's benefit sanctions. Low income, but most of them is benefit sanctions. And the difference in what I see now to 2 years ago, we are part of the welfare state, because people come there, not if you haven't got a voucher. In the beginning, you could come there without a voucher. But now if you haven't got a voucher, you have to get one. So we're very fortunate. We've got a lady who does a surgery there from Centre 70. So if you come there without a voucher, you steer them to her. But 80% of the people who come there now come from the job centre because they've got this letter, you know, as their voucher. So yeah, I think the 21st century, because we're in such a technological age and there's so many really super wealthy people and all this talk about millions and trillions. When I was going to school, trillion wasn't a word that I even hardly knew. And billions. So people's expectations are higher, but the reality is, I'm not going to say they're second-class citizens, I wouldn't dare to say that. But the reality is, there's a lot of there's a lot of people who are picking up fag ends out on the street, you know? Can I borrow 20p from you? So I'm not that enthralled with 21st century living in a city because it's showing up the inequalities of the way we live, you know? So I can't say anything more on that. Going out in those days was fun. I mean, me and my friends, it was part of our lifestyle. That on a Sunday night, I'm sure it was on a Sunday night, we used to all meet up, dolled up, go up there, have fun, dance, not stand around, because nowadays people don't even dance when they go out. They just stand around listening to the music. I think we really had fun. Good fun. I mean, some of us who had boyfriends used to, after they've had their fun with us, they'd wander off with them. But there was like a group of us that used to go out. We used to go. We also used to go up north as well to this club up somewhere in Dalston. But Ramjam was a part of our routine. And say we couldn't make it on a Sunday night, we'd be really upset because you thought you'd be missing something, you know? So yeah, that was a part of our lives, of our scene. You just let your hair down. You weren't mindful about stepping on somebody's toes and being abused. I mean, there were times when obviously people had had too much to drink and they lost a bit of control. But to me, those days were the good old days when you make yourself look nice, you're going out, even though you go there every week, you still have to wear something different, you know? It was something to look forward to. So maybe we took it for granted that it was going to last forever. I think it was in them times that me as an individual started to realise that nothing lasts forever, you know? But certainly for quite a while, and there'd be little arguments, girls having a row about their boyfriends, you looking at him too much or him looking at you too much or you're trying to take him away from her. But it wasn't nasty. It was just let off steam. And the fun part of it was always there, the dancing, the music. Because reggae, I think at them times it was Studio One, like Alton Ellis and reggae. Hardcore reggae wasn't around then, not then. It was blue beat music. I think Bob Marley they used to play a lot of Bob Marley, but it was like Delroy Wilson, Alton Ellis, John Holt, them kind of Studio One. And some, not even, what did they used to call? R&B. You know, it was a mixture, but it was predominantly reggae, because I think, I'm trying to remember some of the artists in them days, like Aretha Franklin and all them kind of people. You'd still hear their music, But it was in segments, like reggae would dominate or our music would dominate, but in between, interspersed with all that, you'd get, you know, funk, whatever you call it now. But yeah, there was another club at the Oval, I think it was, called, oh dear, I can't remember now, is it Go Go? But there was another club that we used to go to, but I didn't used to go to that one as often as I did the Ram Jam coming to Brixton, because in them days I lived in Putney, so I used to come to Brixton, meet up my friends at the town hall, and then we'd walk down Brixton Road making noise, having a laugh, excited about the fact that we were going Ram Jam. Yeah. Then we used to go to parties, house parties, because in them days Coxon Sound was South London, so we used to go to his parties, whether they were in Battersea or in Brixton or wherever, even in North London. We used to go where Coxon played because he played the nicest music as far as we were concerned in those days. I mean, there were other sounds, of course, but he was the one that, and oh yeah, we used to have something in Streatham as well, long after Ram Jam closed, called a Bally High. I don't know if you've heard of that one. That used to be on the corner of where the old ice rink was. We used to go around the corner and go up there. That lasted a while and then it closed again. So gradually all the places that we kind of recognised to go out as a club locally, they all sort of disappeared, really. I can't remember exactly when, but I think the first one that went might have been a Ram Jam, and then the one at Kennington, I know Ballyi. But all the time there was always house parties. Villa Road was quite famous for a shebeen downstairs. I went there a few times, but it was too dark. I didn't like it. Yeah. Ballyi. I'm sure it was the Go-Go. I'd have to ask my cousin. And I never went to the Fridge because it wasn't my generation. I can't think of any more clubs at the minute.
It's interesting you mentioned the shebeen. Like, how were they different to house parties?
Dark.
Physically dark or emotionally dark?
Physically. Smoky. Usually in some kind of basement. The music was good. I think people stayed with their crowds, you know, like you go with friends and you're stuck with them. But the one thing I do remember is they were dark. I think they used to put up black bags at the windows. But the atmosphere was good because people were having a good time and that's how they wanted it. There weren't any fights. I'd only ever been to anywhere that there was a fight. Maybe it was after we'd left or whatever. But the shebeens were different. They were sweaty and dark and smoky and, you know. Yeah. I went to the one at Villa Road about twice.
What kind of music did they play?
Reggae. Not mixed, just our music. And then after a while, I think it got quite hypnotic. Because there were because it was when Rastafari was kind of becoming more global. So some of the music was drumming, people like Culture and a few other of that kind of genre. Also, some of it was not necessarily vocal, a bit like what Linton Kwesi Johnson did, a bit of dub. Yeah, it was dub. I think that's what I really didn't like about it, because after a while it got quite hypnotic. Even though it might be a different artist, it was the same type of music. So you just started to feel a bit like a zombie. Yeah, but some people loved them. I think they still tried to keep them going at different places, but I don't know much about what happened to them. I just don't hear much about them or ever hear anybody say anything about Shabine anymore. But they were, some people just loved going to them because of the anonymity, even though they knew people there, but because it was so dark. If you were there with somebody who wasn't your partner, nobody would notice because it was so dark. So I think there were various reasons why people went to them, but we just used to go because we loved the music. But after a while, it became too much for me in my head. You really are taking me back to some places that I hadn't even remembered.
So thinking about the Shabines, I'm just thinking how the music would have been set up. Were they on massive sound systems?
Yeah, typical big speaker box in your ears on top of one another, because that's how it was in them days. Everywhere you went, they would be lugging all these speakers and turntables, but it was big speakers dotted around the rooms, and a lot of people like to stand beside them, and some of them now are complaining about tinnitus or whatever. But yeah, it was big speakers. The guys, I thought the guys who did those things, they were quite dedicated. They loved it. So lugging around them speakers didn't matter to them. It was part of their work and the enjoyment of packing up after everything had finished. And because, my cousin was part of Gox and Sound, so I got an insight into how they worked sometimes if we got there early, them stringing up, as they would call it. And if we stayed until everything finished, we'd be there until they were stringing down. So, yeah, I got quite an insight into that, into the music side of things. Most of the times it was free. You bought your drinks at the bar. I think that's how they made the money. Occasionally, clubs, you would pay to get in, but most parties were free because they generated their little money from the bars so that they could pay the sound. And the food, you bought that. So it was, you didn't have to have a fortune to go out and have a good time, a couple of quid would give you a good night out. But the clubs, you had to pay to get into them. And suppose they brought an artist over, because the academy, as it is now, prior to now, they used to have all these people come over. A couple of times a year we'd go down there and see some big singer from Jamaica. So that was different. That was paid and structured and organised. But parties, on the whole, they were free unless, I don't know, maybe there was a special occasion that they wanted something to do, they would charge. But it was free and easy. You bought your drink, bought your food, ate it, drank your drink, danced. Sometimes people used to stay until Sunday morning, Sunday lunchtime. It depends on how good it was, how good the music was and the whole atmosphere. So I don't know. They don't seem to have many parties now. It's birthdays, christenings, whatever, 21st. So I don't know what it's like out there now to go to a party, but I haven't really heard anybody say they're going to a blues, because I think maybe when noise pollution started to get really vigilant, all that slowly changed. Because, you know, there could be 2 or 3 parties on the street on a Saturday night because everybody's doing their own thing and they've got their own people who are coming. But gradually, I believe I started to realise you hear of people putting on dances to make money, but not the spontaneous way that we had it when we were growing up. Because you don't go out of a weekend if you don't want to. You know, you could go out of a weekend, you could go out in a week. I think there used to be something at the Bedford in Balham, at Fernley Road, the corner there at Bedford Hill. I mean, that's still a pub and that's still going, but it's a new I think it's more jazz and different sort of thing. I mean, that stopped. Because again, that was another thing. Some pubs used to have things upstairs, you know, like parties. I think they used to like rent them out, but those avenues, there were lots of different venues where you could go in them days and have a good time. I don't think it's the same anymore from that aspect, although some of them, the Swan in Stockwell was another place that used to put on, we used to go there. I can't remember what day, if that was on a Friday, but they used to have a lot of things going for us in, I would say this must have been in the 80s. And then in the 90s, I think things changed really radically. And people stopped having parties. Because, I mean, the police used to come and say, turn it down, and, you know, that sort of thing. But it was all quite good-natured. I mean, I haven't been to a party for years, so I don't know if they still have them. I do go out, but it's when I'm invited to something, you know. I used to go to Academy. I think the last time I went down there was to see Beres Hammond. But there used to be lots of West Indian blacks, reggae artists who used to come there. I used to go there quite a bit.
Seems that it's changed quite considerably then in lots of different ways.
Yeah. And that's why sometimes when I'm being reflective, I say that the young people nowadays, they don't have the kind of fun that we did. We had fun without... You have to be politically correct now, even when you're going out, it seems. But I firmly believe in myself that now that I'm talking to you, that we had a lot of fun that was just clean. You know, I mean, we smoked, we had a drink. Some of us might have even sworn. But it wasn't malicious. It wasn't spiteful. When you're going out for fun. I mean, there was another club that we used to go to now that I'm remembering. We used to go up the West End, up Soho. 20s, Roaring 20s. That was a club in the heart of the West End. We used to have brilliant time up there. I remember one New Year's Eve, we couldn't, my cousin kept falling down because we were living from Balham then. But in the ice and the snow, we got to Wardour Street. We used to go to another club in Paddington called the Q Club. That was brilliant. A lot of GIs used to come there from the base. You know, some beautiful, tall, gorgeous girls would marry some wonderful American man, who, you know, so Yeah, I think we went out with different motives. We went out to have fun. It wasn't about what designer clothes we had on and how many bling we had. It was make sure you look nice, you've got a bit of money in your purse, and you'd be going out with your friends. So it's changed a lot. I don't see young people having the fun that we did. When I do go out, and there's a lot of them anywhere, they will just stand there. You know, they don't. As I say, to me, 21st living isn't like we've moved on and we're more progressive. It's like we've become more introverted and guarding your space and that sort of thing. Because I haven't really... I mean, I've just lived day by day, but I haven't looked back the way that I am now that I'm talking to you and I'm remembering little things. It really does seem to be a big difference in... Because even I'm a second generation. My dad used to have his radiogram, his gram with his music. So again in the house, he used to play his blue beats and his ska and his calypso, not so much. But that, you know, I think you're quite right. There's a lot that's been lost over the generations. Because third and fourth generation, they weren't these, I can't even call some of their names. Whereas we grew up with the whole school type of thing. At home, when you go out, it wasn't exactly the same type of music, but you can identify with it because when reggae became boomy, it was just seemed to kind of cement the fusion between what my dad, say, used to play and the new style. There was that beat there. You can't get away from the beat, even if you listen to Latin American and African. Again, sometimes in music, it reminds me where we're all coming from, irrespective of what shade you are. Because that's one thing, I think. Two things, the food, even if it's prepared differently from another continent, it's there. And the music, soca, and in there somewhere you can make this connection of it being our type of stuff. I don't know how to explain it in that sense. So we can all identify with certain aspects of our culture, but we don't come together. We're all different, Jamaican, Bajan, Trinidadian, African, South American. But if we all sat down and really traced it back, we do make the connection. But because of society, the way the world is, it's divide and rule, so everybody just stays in their own little pockets. Because I don't know if you've experienced it yet within this borough that I know of. South Lambeth is kind of Latin American, Brazilian, whatever. Brixton, people used to say predominantly Jamaican, but I don't think so. We're very mixed in Brixton. But there's different parts of every area. I think people have got quite insular, if that's the right word. Although we say that we're integrated and multicultural, we're still very tribal. Because there seems to be this bridge that we can't all cross. You know, we've got to take our little whatever. Maybe that's what makes the area interesting. I really don't know. But I do know that the sense of community that we used to have I don't see it anymore because everybody's trying to get rich. And the poor people are just sad. And it's a shame, really, because Brixton Village, Reliance Arcade, it's good to see that the economy is coming in, but I've started to realise that it's not benefiting the ordinary people, because it comes back to what I'm saying. Unless you move to Brixton because you want to live in Brixton for the buzz and to be able to say to your friends, oh, I live in Brixton, the money isn't staying in the community, you know. And that's why I think even some of the businesses, they don't get together to form a group that would lobby, that would do something for the community. So again, I'm having to repeat now what I've heard a lot of people say. It's all about the money, whereas I didn't used to think that. But it is all about the money now, because if you can open up a venture in Brixton, you can be kind of guaranteed, especially if it's around food, you can be guaranteed that you'll make something from that because of the Brixton buzz. And unfortunately, I don't see that it's coming down to people like me, or for the majority of normal, everyday people who live in Brixton. Because sometimes, and the thing that I was really going to say was, I'm not against what I'm seeing, because when the market died, not just the street market, but the whole market, it was really sad to see all those places shut that used to be thronging with people, you know? So when it started to get that way again, I thought, well, this is good. But I'm not going to say anything bad about the fact that it's become renowned for food. It's always been renowned for food. But it's different now. Because that, especially back market, as I call it, Reliance Arcade, the whole market used to be busy. You used to have to manoeuvre your way. Like on Pope's Road, you'd be, you know, and in the market itself. So I noticed pretty quickly, I think, that the market had changed. And now, sometimes, as I will say it again, when I do go down there, I can't believe that I'm in Brixton. So I don't know what's going to happen, but... And now a lot of people, I think, are being kind of forced to move elsewhere because the rents are so high. But what I thought was really good, I think Brixton was put on the map with the Victoria line, because I was actually living in Tulse Hill when that happened, and that changed a lot, because a lot of people who worked in the city, because I know people who had moved out, like you get married, you move out, black and white, because I've got... But when the Victoria line, they moved back in, albeit quite a few of them lived in Streatham, but it was all right. You get a bus from Brixton or Dulwich, you know. So the Victoria line was good for Brixton, and it still is good for Brixton. But some of the negative aspects of the upwardly mobile thing has meant that a lot of the people who've sort of been there they've sort of been pushed further down. Because the truth of the matter is, I've not done it. Most of us can't really afford to dine in, eat out in Reliance Arcade. Because if you're going to spend £10 on a burger, that £10 can get you 2 bags of shopping or 3 bags of shopping to go home with on a practical level. So a lot of the people who do come to Brixton and have wonderful time and a great time, they don't live in Brixton. They just come in, they commute in, do what they're doing, and they commute out. Just as with some of the traders, as with the business people. And, you know, if we're going to look at employment, again, that's something else that I've been noticing. When Woolies was there, good old Woolworths, you used to see a lot of young people working in Woolworths, like a Saturday job throughout, even like the summer now. I mean, I had a Saturday job at Ardin and Hobbs. And it's them little things that I'm noticing now. People will more employ their family or friends of family in their little businesses. To me, you don't see as many young black people in the retail sector as you used to in them days. So yeah, there's been a lot of changes, big shifts, but I think it's all part of, not even globalisation, that's too big a word, it's just part of how we've evolved and how people live. And I am of the opinion, I mean, I haven't been to Manchester for a bit. I used to go up there to see family. All the inner cities, I think, some of the fabric of previous has been eroded because of immigration, the government's... People talk about social cleansing. I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's happened. And when I'm coming down just now, right on the corner of Stockwell Park, there used to be loads of flats there that people lived in, and I think there was a home as well for old people. Well, that is now some £500,000 apartments that they're building. You know, all these little nooks and crannies you see building going. But it's not for people on the waiting list. It's for people who can afford £250,000 to buy a 2-bedroom flat on the A23. So one can become a bit disillusioned and a bit cynical. But I think we still have to strive to be a part of the community. And since there's been so many tragedies with young boys, there are things happening, but everybody's doing their own thing. And maybe there should be more of a push, because they say in unity we have strength. Maybe there should be more of a push by these activists and community-minded people to really come together. Rather than have 10 projects, you have one with the umbrellas underneath it. But as I say, I just get the impression sometimes that people are just wanting it for their own self-gratification and to get an OBE to say that they've done sterling work. And I mean, somebody like even me being here should get an OBE, because over 30 years, as far as I know, he's been working in the community, helping, enabling, empowering. You know, and that's why I feel so privileged and honoured to have been asked to speak to you, because I know where he's coming from and I know what he's given to the community. There are other people like him. And as you say, like Michael, because of what happened to his mother and certain other people. But I just have a strong feeling that those kind of people, I don't know if the same type of characters are around now to push this generation forward in the way that they did. Because honestly, I'm sitting here talking to you now. I don't know everything that goes on, but I try to keep abreast with what's happening. But it's different. It's totally different now. And because the young generation, they've grown up in this individualistic society, it's everyone for themselves. And I get the feeling that most people don't think they're unique anymore. They've got to be part of the mass with these tattoos, and I think that's how they identify. I'm not sure, this young generation now, I think they don't want to be individual. They want to be like everybody else. Whereas with our generation, we wanted to be individual. We celebrated differences. I mean, we have these big words now about inclusion and all kind of things, but it's not positive. And the aggressiveness comes out of, I think people have got this mass mentality now, like a herd, you know? They want to stand out, but they want to be part of the crowd. So you can't have it both ways. Because I can't remember, I can't even remember a tattoo shop when I was growing up. But no, they're everywhere. Everyone's got them. Whether they're real or not, I don't know. But people don't think the way our generation, we were aware, we were conscious. I'm not too sure about these young people nowadays, because the media has given them so much rubbish, put so many stupid labels on them, they kind of believe it. And since last September, because I've always worked with young people, but since last September doing this voluntary work with children not in education, I've learnt about what's going on in society. And it's not good. Being out of school is cool. When, God, you've got to work, get a qualification so you can get a good job, so you can earn good money. That was our thinking. Now it's, everybody wants to go to university, whether they're academic or not. Everyone wants to be on YouTube, do their selfies. I don't think individualism or being an individual is that important anymore. You've got to be seen to be part of this mass. And I think that is one of the things, even in this borough, that has impacted on people a lot. Because Lambeth used to be a real, what's this word? Pioneer in community, in taking residents' views into consideration. But now it's the economy, prime sites. You're in central London. We're only a couple of minutes away from the West End. Everything in Lambeth is worth money, property-wise, whether it's a garage or a shed. So it comes back to 21st century thinking. It's all about the economy, economics. Whereas in the past, yes, this is it. In the past, there was an element of people, but now it's about profit. I think a lot of people have the wrong idea about Brixton. I've heard it being compared to the Bronx. I don't see that. It's difficult, this one, because I go out every day and I interact with people out there every day. Sometimes I sit at my friend's stall for an hour, half an hour, it depends how I'm feeling. Or sometimes I go around to Station Road, because I've got a friend round the back there. I've got quite a few friends in Brixton. If I could say anything, it would be people shouldn't be afraid to come to Brixton. It's no worse than anywhere else in England or London. I mean, there was a time when this drug thing was in the market, but all that has sorted itself out. What I can share is that there's still some really, really nice, genuine people down there. And don't be afraid to come and explore. Because I think some of the people who come, they just come to go to Mamalands or whatever, a specific place. They should walk around the market, Brixton, not the high street, because it's like any other high street. But I don't even think people know that one of the first places that got electric lights was Brixton. It's to make the history of the place more interesting so that people will want to explore. Because I think on the whole, the majority of people who do come to go to a specific place and then they come back out. So maybe if they did a bit of walking around, and sometimes, yeah, you see people come around and they chat to my friend, ask him how long he's been there, because he's been out there for 30 odd years. So he's a good person who's seen all the changes, because there was a time when he was making a fortune out there, and now he's lucky if he makes 30 quid on a day. So he's got a lot of rich history of the market. But I would say it's not to be afraid. The reputation isn't nowhere near what the place is. Like the reputation precedes or makes it seem as if it's unfriendly and dangerous, but it's not. It's all right. I don't see it as being special. It's just a neighbourhood that, because of the history and the fact that a lot of West Indians, black people, initially settled in and around Brixton, gives it that kind of exotic flavour. I don't see it as that. I just see it as my town centre. And I think if more people can see it like that, it might be beneficial to pull it up. But I do believe that the council have kind of, people who live in Streatham and Waterloo, because a lot of people don't even realise where the borough stretches from. but I do. They have a resentment towards Brixton because they believe that all the money is spent in Brixton, the council. But I don't see it like that. I see that the council, I don't know how they decide where to spend their money, but I do know that Brixton gets a lot of attention that that doesn't benefit. It's negative. I mean, I'm going back now. Pratt's used to be in Streatham. That's a part of the John Lewis's group. Now, when this council, to me, as a resident, lost that, they lost the plot. Because people were coming from all over the place to go to Pratt's. Now, there's an Argos there and a Lidl's. You know? So some of the things that they do when you think that it's going to improve the borough, because I'm not talking about Brixton, I'm talking about Lambeth, it doesn't seem to make sense. I mean, I used to go to the rec centre, which to me is a monstrosity that doesn't encourage me to go there. So, and what I kind of see now, a lot of the people who've impacted on our lives, they don't live in the area. They're consultants who come in, get their megawatts, megabucks, decide that, yeah, those people can live like that, in that kind of thing, and then they go away. They don't see how it works. So I think the council needs to be a little bit more forward-thinking and react more to residents' needs and views. Because a lot of people have got disillusioned because they don't see the progress that they thought they'd see. I mean, when I moved over to this borough, they were really at the forefront of being different. Because I think Ted Knight was the leader of the council then, Red Ted as they used to call him. And they were really progressive. They were covering ground, especially on equal opportunities, that other people hadn't even thought. I mean, this Lambeth became a model for loads of local authorities in that area. So, and then I don't know what happened. They seem to have lost it. And now, I don't know. I mean, I don't question, I don't argue. I just get on with my daily life. But it would be really, really good to see this regeneration benefiting the residents, not just catering for the people who can afford to buy these expensive properties. I mean, up at Tulse Hill, there's this craziness going on with demolishing an estate. Round the back, there's this madness with the Guinness Trust. You know, I do know what's happening because I am kind of involved in community groups, but I'm not an activist, and I only go to meetings to support and to find out what's going on. It lives on, but there's no one individual or even two individuals or even half a dozen individuals that I could sit here and name. So I would say that there is still a sense of community, but it's in pockets. I think there's a lot of resentment. I don't know against whom. If it's the council, I don't know. But people are quite negative about a lot of issues. Maybe I get the impression that they think it's a waste of time. because even if they scream and shout, people will listen, but nothing changes. So apathy, is that the right word? And I think the personalities of the previous generation, because that's what we're looking at now, they were a bit, didn't give a toss. They just went ahead. They were kind of determined, I think, to make a difference, if that's the right word. From where I'm at now, there are quite a few people who say they want to make a difference. But I think it's mainly about them. Their heart, all right, on Angeltown Estate, you might do a bit of research, you might have heard, there was a lady called Dora Bottomay or whatever. She set up a residents association and she was really passionate about change. I got to know that woman through the South London Press. Yeah, I had friends and maybe relatives who lived on Mitesfields, as it then was. And it wasn't a very friendly place. But then I started to hear about this woman called Dora, who, she had a vision. She was passionate about change. And she did change, help to change Angeltown. Sorry, started to cough. Because you could see it. It wasn't just talk. The physical happened. They knocked down this and they remodeled that and it was regenerated successfully, from what I believe. Now, she was really, I mean, as I say, I didn't know her personally, but I got to know her through the media. And I was really impressed by the power she had to effect the changes, because it all rose from this residents' association. I can't think of anybody apart from her right this minute who achieved what she did as a resident without an army behind her. Obviously, she must have had a good group of people around her. But even with this new thing about Cressingham Gardens, there are activists involved, because I get these notifications to come to meetings and all that, but I'm not an activist. I don't know if there's anybody around who could get the community, because everybody's got their own issues. I mean, I think at the moment there's a lot around teenagers because of what's happening with the loss of lives. It's like, sometimes to me, it's like people get on this bandwagon because it's fashionable. And because it's in the media, the spotlight will sort of come back and they'll get a little bit of fairy dust. I could be cynical, I don't know. But what I'm started to realise is there's a lot of talk, but I don't really see the action, the outcomes, which is really what you're looking at. I mean, a lot of the agencies that used to help people, they don't exist anymore because of a lack of funding. So there's a lot of pressure on community groups, advice agencies, whatever you call them, because there's people with really severe problems who can't go to the law centre anymore because it's shut, who can't go to the community centre anymore because it's shut. You might see them up at Bar Hill Road in Streatham at the Citizens Advice Bureau, but you might have to wait 2 or 3 months before you can be seen properly. So I think resources have impacted a lot on how people live, because you can't get advice and support because everybody's under so much pressure. So I don't want to say that people aren't doing sterling work out there still. Maybe it's unrecognised, but it's like when I say I come down here, people don't even realise that this place has been here for God knows how many years. You know, there's a lot that goes on. I think some of the people who do the grassroots works, they don't get recognised because they're not doing it for publicity and for OBEs. But increasingly, it seems that people's motives are around getting funding, putting on this project without the long term thinking what the effects might be. I don't see like a lot of interventions. Yeah, they've got a riding school round the back in Brixton, and they've got these boxing things in Brixton or down at Loughborough. But they're not talking about the rest of the borough. What about the other young people who live in Streatham and Norwood and, you know, so because of this focus on facilities in Brixton, it's like Lambeth is Brixton. I think people need to be more open and just educate young people. Not everybody's going to get on X Factor or BGT or whatever. I don't watch those things because I don't. The only time I ever really watch reality is if somebody's at my house and they're obsessed about what might be coming on, and that doesn't mean I sit and watch it with them. You know, there's a lot of education that needs to be done. It's not just about reading and writing and doing sums. It's back to what you were saying about cultural awareness, where we're coming from, where we'd like to go, and how we'd like to see our communities developed. There seems to be an aspect of business intertwined with all these community projects or initiatives. So it all, to me, it comes back to the money. Whether you're going to get value for money. Of course, everybody wants value for money. But the quality of life is not there for a lot of people. They might have the material goods that they've sacrificed to get, or whatever means they might use to get it, but it doesn't even seem to bring them any satisfaction, you know? And sometimes when I look at these ancient civilizations to see how they built up their community, their society, their world from nothing, none of us right now could cope if we had to go back, because we're so used to this and to that. I mean, if somebody's late, if the trains go up the wall, everybody's moaning and groaning, oh, it's the bad weather. Nobody can control nature. You can't blame TfL if the snow's gonna fall. You know, I think it's how we think, And then it affects the way we live, and then it affects the way we interact and behave with other people. But coming back to what we were saying, there needs to be more. It's not about more community involvement. It's about communities being given a voice. And then when they voice whatever, they actually see that if the ideas or the proposals or whatever they've come forward with, something happens. Then that belief and confidence would build that, yes, we're all working together for the good of, rather than everyone's suspicious of the council, everyone's suspicious of that community group. Too many young black boys go there, they're too loud, they're too noisy, they smoke too much weed, they do this, they do that. You know, we've learnt to live together, but I don't think it's a comfortable feeling of living together. It's the haves and the have-nots. It's who you know and who you don't know. And I heard about it on the news, I've read about it, I've seen certain little things, but it's only this year that I really became aware, as a person who's lived in this area for over 30 years, what postcode problems meant. Because I've been fortunate enough in my voluntary work to have contact with some young people who cannot leave Brixton. And when I say it, I mean it. Had a young lad who I used to meet him round at some youth club around the back. If that's not available, it has to be the library. So one day I suggested that we took a ride on a bus up to Westow Hill. Couldn't come. I said, what about the library at Battersea? He can't come out of Brixton. He's that scared. And he's not the only. I met a few other lads like that. And in fact, I met a young girl who I wanted to take her to Tooting Bec. And her mum says, have you got a car? And I said, no, I do public transport. She says, oh, she can't come then. Tulse Hill up there, Tooting Bec down there. Then the next suggestion was, I'll meet her at West Norwood Library. 4 bus stops from her house, and she couldn't come. So things that I heard about, couldn't grasp them. I've had to deal, seen them at first hand this year. So it's been really good to do what I've been doing, because it's given me even the confidence to talk to you about it, because prior to February, March, I didn't realise. I thought it was just So a lot of education needs to take place, but it's going to be a real uphill battle because attitudes are just so set. And unless you are exceptional, or you seem to be doing exceptional work with a specific target group, you're not going to move on, because they're so entrenched in what's happening around them, to their friends, to their cousins, to their brothers, to their uncles. So I really can't even think what could be done to improve. I mean, I thought when they opened up that archive up there after all those years, because I went to the opening, I thought that would have been a great place for a start. well, you know, the history, it's not all just about the Windrush generation. My parents didn't come here on the Windrush. The majority of immigrants didn't come here on the Windrush. You know, they need to acknowledge more of everything rather than just some specific things that they just keep throwing. I mean, my friend went to Morocco. She had plaits in her hair. First question she was asked, Jamaica, Bob Marley. You know? And she said, Doreen, she said, it was really interesting. I said, yeah, we're everywhere. Our culture, for such a small island, I mean, now it's Usain Bolt, you know? But I'm not talking as a person with Jamaican background. I'm just talking as a normal woman who's lived in this area from 74. And I've seen these phenomenal changes. And I've started to wonder and ask myself, have we moved forward into the 21st century? Infrastructure-wise and looking-wise, yes. But psychologically, I'm not sure that we have. Because people have this pack mentality. And man's inhumanity to man is so apparent, like even on a daily basis. You go out there on a bus, you go down to the street. So in order for society, or this society, they have to lose some of the values that they've got and regain some of the ones that they had. They weren't that primitive, but now that we're looking back on it, it might seem that way. But I think people in the 60s and 70s, and even as you mentioned, the Mary Seacole and Olive Morris, they were before their time. They had vision. They were blessed. I mean, I was watching something about Martin Luther King the other day. He was a prophet, you know? And then I reflected back on the fact that there's a black president in the US. Whether he's competent or not, he's a black man, you know? So there's a lot of progress that has been made, and there still could be a lot more made. But because the world revolves around money, that seems to take away all the thinking about humanity. Maybe it's because I haven't got any why I think the way I do, but doing this has made me really reflect on, because I came here in 62. I went to school here and potted on, got an education and a profession. But now it seems as if people have lost their identity. More individuals did make a big difference. But now I cannot, for the life of me, think about anybody locally who I would get up and say, go and listen to them speak, read what they say, what they're about, because everybody's got their different little thing that they want to do. I think there needs to be more cohesion. All right, maybe if communities are going to rise up again, it would be an exceptional person who would take the helm to pull people in. And I don't see that kind of personality in our local area who is going to do that. Because if it's politics, it's about being an MP, struggling maybe to become leader of the Labour Party or mayor of London, which is political ambition. It's not community. You call on the community, yes, if you need their votes, but they're not part of your big plan. Your big plan is to get that job. So, I don't know. I don't think people are loving. I think it's ambition and greed, black or white, who say they represent our communities. Because they're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it to earn good money, to be recognised, and that's about it, I think. Yeah.
Perfect. So just finally, whereabouts do you live now in Brixton? Which road?
I just live down on Brixton Road. I'm not going to say exactly where, but I live on main Brixton Road, about a couple of bus stops from here. When I first moved down here, I was so scared because I'd never lived this close to Brixton. I'd always lived in Streatham or Tulse Hill or Clapham. And because I was ill when I first moved down here, and I'd been resisting it, but I had to move because I was climbing like too many stairs without a lift. But I had a beautiful masonette that I loved. And then, because of my health, I had to get a ground floor flat. So, I'm not going to pretend that I wasn't a bit anxious. But after I got the offer in August, and I actually literally moved in October. Because I kept putting it off. I got to do my floor, I got to decorate, I got to do this, I got to do that. And when I moved to where I am, within a week, it's like everything was happening. I'd never lived on a main road before. There were accidents with the buses, accidents with crashes. Then one day, some guy jumped over my fence and the police were after him. So he couldn't get away. So I heard knock, knock, knock on my door. Can you let us in? So the first few weeks of me living down there, it was full of excitement. They came through my home with this person that they'd arrested in my garden. Can you imagine that? So all those things, oh God, what have I done? But gradually it settled down and I never had that experience again. But for a while, it's like every day something was happening out there, like buses and car crashes and people getting knocked down. And now, maybe it still happens, but because I was literally sitting at my window them time, just looking out every day, because I had no purpose, I had no focus, I was ill, I was under the hospital, I was, getting better from my health. So it was really crazy when I first moved down there, but I love it now. It was the best thing that could have happened because I didn't want it because of being on the main road, and I'd always lived in Tulse Hill or Streatham. So the thought of living in Brixton was a bit, I don't want to live down there. But after I'd been there, you see, when I got that transfer, it was the best thing that could have happened for me because I was literally going to hospital nearly every day, which was where I lived, was £24 every time, taxi. So the offer that I got was taking my holistic, I think, into account. I put it like that because I was able to get off a bus, walk a couple of yards to where I live. The shops were near. I didn't have to climb any stairs because I was on the ground floor. I've got the massive garden that I don't even use, so I feel guilty about that. A family should have that with children. So maybe when I sort myself out, I might see if I can do a mutual exchange with somebody. But it's a nice little place. I've got security, I've got camera, you know, it's okay. But in the beginning, I was a bit anxious about moving there, but I'm okay, I'm all right. I can get to, that's why I say to you, I can get to anywhere, not just in London, but in the country, because from I come out of where I live and I go on, if I want to go down to Brixton for the Victoria line or for the Overground, if I want the Northern line, I now know don't bother go Brixton, get a bus up to the Oval or to Kennington, you know, so yeah, I like where I live. I'm quite happy there, and I can get to the hospital without any problems. I get a 159 up to Tommy's or a 133 up to Guy's. So yeah, I'm quite happy. Brixton is now, I don't even bother to cross the road to go over to Tesco. Brixton is my local shop. If I want something, I jump on a bus. It's only like 3 bus stops away. So yeah, I'm quite all right.